Well, I don't like the fact that you can't, it won't keep recording you while you switch out of this app. That's annoying. I'm going to start this video over. Hello, I'm Pastor Eric, and I am a pastor because I have information to disseminate that is of spiritual value. I am not a pastor because I am a spiritual advisor. I am not advising you on any particular spiritual course. I'm advising you specifically on how to manage how best to maximize the likelihood of you making choices that you end up liking a lot. I want to maximize the extent to which you define the person that you are, to the extent that doing so improves your life experience. One of the axioms of this model is that everybody, every human being, every agent, well, not necessarily every agent, every human being, their life is improved by at least some quantity of making. Which is to say, that doesn't mean that everybody should make as much as they can, or that, only makers are really experiencing humanity or any garbage like that. It simply means that it's satisfying to complete the generation, the creation of something. And it's that process of making is uniquely human for the most part. I mean, you can argue, well, these animals and these tools are out or whatever. It's uniquely agent for sure, because all agents make something. They make baby agents. And that's the most animalistic space form. Dimension of physical reference, spatial body, objects in space, kind of making that there is, the most primal, the making of babies. And I don't mean the sex, I mean the actual conception of children inside the body, right? So we are of making and for making on a biological level. Biologically, we are of and for making. All agents are. All living agents are. Now, when I say we are of and for, I am saying we are the effect of, we're causally linked to this as a consequent, right? And the something else is the antecedent, the cause, or at least the event precipitating. So the nice thing about antecedent and consequent is it doesn't actually necessitate a causal relationship. It establishes that the cause is irrelevant if you can consistently conclude that the consequent follows the antecedent. So if I say, if it rains, I'll bring an umbrella, it doesn't really matter whether the rain causes you to bring an umbrella. Does the rain cause you to bring an umbrella? Well, it prompts you to bring an umbrella. Is that the same as causing? I don't know. But anyway, that's why antecedent and consequent are better than cause and effect. And better even than correlate, because then you're establishing a correlation. So regardless of my little nomenclature tangent here, I wanted to mention that I got prime seats to the Poop Gathering Festival if anyone wants to go. Prime. Like right at the 50-yard line. Bring your nose plugs. It's going to be ripe. It's a hot summer's day and all the poop's fresh. Okay, so there's a causal link. There's, what other kind of link? What were they even talking about a second ago? Oh yeah, of and for making. Now the for is the more challenging one. It's the preposition that gives people the most trouble, which is weird because intuitively there's nothing more strange about it than any of the other things people think are rock solid facts. Purpose. Well, people struggle with this word because it's a word that doesn't have a very clear definition. Purpose implies intent, generally speaking. You can't have a purpose without an intention. So an intention implies agency. If you say, what is the purpose of humanity? You're saying to a lot of people when they hear that question, you are saying, do you believe in God? Because if we have a purpose, then there must be an agent imposing that purpose upon us through his or its intention. Now, at the end of the day, all of truth, all of language, all our symbolic systems are tested against what? Well, they're tested against consistency with our own intentions. So, what does that have to do with? That doesn't change the fact that in the dimension of physical reference, this is a yellow lighter. This is a yellow and white dress. No, it's not. It's black and gold. Or black and blue, or whatever he said was. I saw yellow and white, gold and white. That's an example where our symbols allow us to inform each other that we're receiving different data about the dimension of physical reference through in an abnormal way, right? And normally, if we look at something, we see basically the same thing, or we see the same thing we call yellow that we always see. So if I say this is orange, to me it's orange. I can't exactly describe what orange looks like to you. If the orange I see is the blue you see, we really wouldn't be able to tell, right? Everything I ever saw that was orange, I said was orange. Everything you ever saw, to me, the color you're looking at is blue. But you always call that orange. And I mean, if you were to see the color I was looking at, which you call orange, you notice that I'm actually looking at green. I call it orange. Well, you would think it was green, but you never get to find that out because there's no way to test it, right? In other words, because color is not a space object, it doesn't lend itself to confirmation tests of how consistently our data input and processing systems process the same, what appears to be the same data, right? So it's like, if you imagine we're basically groping our way around a dark room with other people, and we run into something, you feel like, okay, it's about as long as my elbow to my hand, this thing. And somebody else goes like, well, there's only here. And I go, oh, it's about this big. Or maybe you've already used this symbol, so you already have a shared set of symbols that's, oh, it's about 2 feet. You go, oh, it's about 2 feet long. And everyone has a general idea of how long it is. And they go and they touch it and they go, oh, this is only 3 inches long, whatever it is. It's only 2 inches long. Well, he can't be talking about this thing. He must be talking about something else. And you grope around and you find, oh, are you talking about this thing? Oh, okay. Is it also squishy in the middle and hard on the ends? Yeah, okay. Is it also, does it also have a plastic wrapping around the top of it? And does it have parts of it that are super hot and parts of it that are super cold? No, I don't feel any cold parts. Well, what about down? Oh, yeah, that part is cold down there at the bottom. If you're talking about a space object, it's really easy to do, right? But you're talking about color, like, let's imagine there were a color that nobody had ever seen before, that we can't imagine, right? The color, or let's imagine this, though. Here's one thing we can't imagine. Let's imagine Joe, a person who's been raised his whole life on purpose. Everyone has gone out of their way to do this. That at no point in Joe's life has he ever seen the color purple. Now, there's something equivalent to this thought test back in, who was it, like Hume or somebody, I think, did this thought test. But my point is different. The thing is this. So is that guy going to be, are you going to be able to describe to him purple and have him conceptualize what that looks like without his having seen it? And my point would be no. And the reason is because there's no other access point to color except through time objects, which is to say temporary objects, objects that require energy to sustain existence rather than objects that require energy to change. Time objects are basically human experiences. So color is a human experience. It is data that we receive. If you imagine your eyes are closed, your ears are closed, your nose is whatever, and instead of receiving actual sights and sounds and smells, we received the symbols directly. So, you're just sitting there in complete dark and silence, except you get this text thing pop up in front of you. And in front of you is a computer screen. And to the left is a garage door, blah, 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 blah. And it describes everything to you. Well, that's what it is. Except the symbols that we get aren't words. They're other kinds of symbols. They're these visual things. Little waves pop, wavicles. Half space, half time wavicles. Called light. They hit your eye and go pew 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 and make you blind. Blind with color, and color's gone. As soon as you look away, it has permanence to the extent the object that functions as its host has permanence. This explanation for color is better than the science one. Science one being, well, light hits an object and is reflected, and there are different, spectrums of light, blah, 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 blah. The science thing is right and pointless and useless. Now, what I mean by that is, to the extent that the scientific method and the scientific theory of light is useful, which is to say, we figure out ways to utilize consistencies we discover. And what I mean by consistencies is, if a human or a group of humans behaves with recipe X, they will get outcome Y. Okay, if I get a prism and I put it in front of a light or a laser or whatever, I can see it split into these things, yada, yada, yada. And I can come up with an explanation for why, and that explanation makes sense, and yada, yada, yada. That's all fine and dandy, and it's good to have that understanding of things. But the problem is, we are so focused on this dimension of physical reference and how it works, we seem to be forgetting that the reason philosophy is ultimately the only science that matters, and it's absolutely a science, is because 99% of our existence is removed entirely from the dimension of physical reference. It's just the dimension of physical reference for almost everything we do and care about provides moments of data, and then all the rest of the time we're happy or worried or scared or whatever about the meaning that we're making about those moments. Now, when I say the purpose of the human being is to make meaning, one might conclude that I'm implying an agent that intends a specific outcome. And if my model is going to be truly meaningful, it's going to need to provide some additional insight on that difficult question of deism, origins of the universe, purpose, things like that. What we already know is that no highly specific model will ever be universal. And I've established as a criterion of success here a universality to it. So we also know that this model cannot be reductive towards other models. I can't say in this model, oh, well, the reason blah, blah, blah is because they're stupid and they're wrong. Their belief system is dumb, and just that's why. I personally believe that, but my model doesn't have to do that, right? It has a different way of approaching those sort of things. It turns it back to intention. Well, oh, you don't like the Muslim way with the let's suppress the women and blah, blah, blah? Well, why is it manifest? It's the manifestation of human intention. It can't possibly be anything else. Okay, so what's the intention? The intention, in that case, is solidity, certainty, faith, all the empowerment of faith, which is necessary for a peoples who have been functionally diminished over time so substantially, who are existing in realities where they're wholly aware that life elsewhere is very different and objectively preferable. where they can win is in faith. And being willing to go to the mat, right? All right, assholes, you Westerners, you know. All y'all are getting middle-class jobs and living in free societies, while you seem to be content to let us all live under dictators. Well, let's help you. Why don't you try this? Well, that's not our way. What's going on here? Well, you interfered with all this fighting, right? It is inevitable, unavoidable, that agents manifest themselves. It's the only thing they can do. An individual can only do one thing. He or she can manifest his or her own identity. And that's it. Everything in your reality is a subset of your identity. It can't be anything else. So this thing, this lighter, it has no existence except insofar as it plays a role in my intention. There's some other light around the world, presumably, right? One imagines. We operate under the assumption that there is. I know for a fact, I operate under the assumption that other people in the world have lighters too. That there are other lighters like this. That if I go to the store, there's going to be a lighter I can buy tomorrow there. And I operate under that assumption because thus far, when I build intentions around that assumption, my intentions have been consistently fulfillable. In other words, the symbolic sets I build to explain the world allow me to consistently fulfill my intentions because I test them on just that point. That's how I test them. It's the only way I could possibly ever test them. So, the other key axiomatic point of this thing is emergence, which is to say that set completion is an event that functions as a foundational force in the universe. That's where the magic comes in, right? There's no reason to reject non-rational models if most significant phenomena on some level are no further reducible, and we can conclude nothing about why and how they happen except it's magic, right? So that's another axiom of this. We got to remember that emergent phenomena, which is what science does with shit they can't explain. Why can't they explain it? And stuff they can't explain, and also that they know they're not going to be able to explain along, they're not going to be able to explain in keeping with the expectations of science criteria, which is to say, you need to further reduce this behavior, this phenomenon that emerges from the behavior of these agents. Let's reduce it to distinct causal chains. Let's deconstruct it in that fashion. Let's make it a recipe. We can reproduce. We can test it. We can falsify it. All that stuff. Well, I mean, that works fine for some stuff, and it works fine for some stuff, not because it's actually working, but because we're so small and it's so big that it seems like it is, like that kind of thing, you know, or it depends on the context, but you understand the mechanism I'm talking about, where actually this mountain is moving very, very slowly, but we're, you know, it's moving so slowly and we move so fast compared to it that we can't even notice it. Actually, this tree is growing right now, but we can't even notice it. It happens usually with time. I mean, always with time, but what I mean is that the big small thing is usually not big small, it's time. But it could be big small. You could say, well, actually, this is made up of many tiny little trees, this drawing here. But we're not close enough to see the detail of the little trees. It just looks like fur. But that fur is actually, if you look really close, it's little tiny little trees. That phenomenon occurs with what we think of are sound scientific truths. The causality that science goes, okay, well, we nailed this one down. We've got this model, this explanation. Now, it's just a theory. It could change, but it's a sound theory. It's got good correlative strength. Well, yeah, it does have good correlative strength, but what does that actually mean? It just means that we're looking at something from, you know, that we can't tell the mountain's moving because it's a mountain. That's why it seems like it's not moving. But yeah, it is moving. Same thing with our most trusted explanations for things. Well, how come he's able to lift that big heavy thing? Oh, he's got leverage. He uses this, and there's this function of reality or something. What else would you call that? The fact that you can use leverage to move things more easily. Well, it's what makes space space. It's definitionally part of space. It's not anything else. It's not any higher level of thing than that. You can't say the capacity to employ leverage to increase strength is a function or an event or an object or a vector or anything, except just that's what it means to have objects in space that are distinct. It's definitionally part of it in the same sense that not being round is definitionally part of a square. You can't reduce it any further. So we desperately want the level of the illusionary certainty of science. That's the people who have genuine faith in this world are the people who think that their rational models are superior in nature because they have more, not even more consistent, but they have more testable and more falsifiable predictive functions. But the problem is not a matter of superior or inferior. It's, first of all, what's your purpose for using this approach? And this is where the argument between atheists and non-atheists is just so goddamn ridiculous. You are arguing this point by comparing it to other historical truths that you believe are more well supported and therefore from that are more legitimate to draw than conclusions that are drawn about the nature of the past from the Bible. What is crazy about this, of course, is it doesn't matter where you get the ideas from or whatever. At the end of the day, all you guys are doing is saying, I have a different made-up story about the past. That's it. But there's a can't possibly be. Your made-up story's dumb. Yeah, well, your made-up story's not much more dumb. Not much less dumb than mine. Look, the point is you're missing the point, right? All we have, our entire identity one part of that is called the stories we have of our history as a species, as a country, as a race, as a gender, as an agent, as a thinker, because the species, we evolve on a time, look, we evolve in space through Darwin's mechanism, which is a survival of the fitness competition. We evolve in time by improving the ecosystem, which is to say, as time objects have ever increasing producibility, durability, flexibility, movability, shareability, the species becomes increasingly intelligent. And the reason is because fundamentally, the same mechanism is at play, but it's a mechanism that's at play socially. And this is why we have to embrace and not think of it as a bad thing and like a mean guy thing and like a being a dick thing. The adversarial process makes everybody smarter. And it happens whether you want to or not. I mean, you don't have to embrace it or not. It's going to happen regardless. You are under no obligation to. But embracing it allows you to manifest the most complete version of yourself you possibly can. And it's worth it. It's worth it to be seriously engaged with this phenomenal species-wide moment of elevation. Know that this is that time. We're right there. Right there. The power of decent people going like, what the F? When they see a video of Ray Rice punching his wife or a cop shooting some guy or whatever. The power of indignation. Power of shaming. Do people go overboard sometimes and shame the shit out of somebody who doesn't really deserve it? Yeah, they do. That's part of the process of growth as well. Me saying that is contributing to the mimetic set of ideas and principles and thoughts out there that are specifically about how do we manage the difficulties of other agents who don't conform to fundamental principles, which is to say they don't respect the rights of other agents, and so they commit crimes or they do whatever. How do we deal with those people? Well, naturally, that's how. When the shaming goes too far, naturally, the shamers get shamed for their shaming. And people find a balance. And the best narratives get those extra likes, and they end up winning. They get adopted by those people. Oh, next time I encounter them, I'm going to say the same thing. Because they are stronger arguments, because they promote the common good, because they conform with our existing models, our existing Western models. It's only true of the West, right? I can make arguments about free expression here and win those arguments based on people having those principles resonate with them. Not everywhere yet. But why do those principles resonate ever stronger? They win the arguments. That's why. And now that everybody's online, the public discourse is something we can all share in, people realize they'd rather say things that sound smart than things that sound dumb. They'd rather have good reasons than bad reasons. They realize that to the extent that they're engaged in just about anything that's not utterly banal, they're engaged in an adversarial process necessarily. And so once again, we determine the truth, language, reality itself, all stem from the fundamentally adversarial nature of intention. It can be cooperative, but when I say adversarial, what I mean is as an agent, my will is to manifest my identity in coordination with allies in a fundamentally adversarial world that is not necessarily competitive. So adversarialness doesn't necessarily is normally considered more strong language than competitive. But that's not my point. These ideas, they're competing against each other. The individuals are competing on a different scoring field. I'm not picking the ideas that are better because they're better ideas. I'm picking the ideas better because using better ideas helps me better manifest my own intentions. And to the extent that I have to manifest my own intentions, I need to shape the intentions and actions of others to some extent or another. And I do that with the functions of the agent, the getting, the writing, the putting. Anyway, that's it for this video. It's 36 minutes. I'm going to go hang out with Candace. I think I'm going to have some sexual intercourse with my wife. That sounds, what's the word I'm looking for? Fulfilling. I'm addicty about a lot of things, like cigarettes and whatever. But I enjoy sexual intercourse with my wife, I think, in a very healthy fashion. It's not something I fixate over at all. I never think about sexual intercourse on a normal moment-to-moment basis. I'm thinking about other things. But, when you're with the same person for a long time, you become very comfortable. And it's very, very much like being at home, So, yeah, I think that's what you're going to do. You're going to take a shower and I already told my wife earlier, I was like, hey, what do you think about having sexual intercourse later? She's like, yeah, totally. What time? And I'm like, I don't know, 10:30, 11? She's like, well, let's aim for 10:30, but 11's okay. And it's now 11:05, so if I don't get in there pretty quick, then maybe I'm not even going to be able to have sexual intercourse. And then I'll be disappointed. Y'all wish you hadn't bet me at all. Because you know why? That's right. I'll tell you why. Is that really gross watching me wipe my nose on a video? Probably. I'm rapping Eric.